Welcome to another edition of the Quarter Booth Podcast here at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. We're at the beautiful Boulud restaurant with our special guest today. First of all, I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today, political analyst, former Liberal MNA David Heurtel, and Raphaël Melançon, who is, of course, the founder and president of...
Trafalgar Strategies.
I knew that, Trafalgar Strategies, but for our purposes today, our political analyst as well. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Whoever would like to kick it off, David, let's start with you. So just overall, French debate, English debate last night, your overall assessment of how things went.
Well, the overall assessment is that I think from just a political perspective, everybody was waiting if Mark Carney was going to finally stumble. If there was going to be call it a Biden moment or a Sachi Curl moment, because ever since Mark Carney got into the political game officially, there was the French debate for the Liberal leadership, and everybody was holding their breath. Nothing happened. Then he won the leadership, and then there were interviews. There was a major interview with Patrice Roy of Radio Canada. Everybody was holding their breath. Nothing happened. Then we could go on and on. He did Tout le monde en parle, les chefs. He did the French debate. Nothing really happened. Quebecers, Francophone Quebecers, have discounted the fact that Mark Carney does not speak French very well. They've made their peace with that. They haven't made it into the key issue for this campaign. And the way you know this as well, the top news from the French debate was the Canadians making the playoffs. and yesterday for the English debate, the top news coming out of the English debate was the whole thing about the scrum after being canceled, and Rebel News and whoever else trying to somehow affect the scrum after. That was the top news. So it shows you how much, we'll see the polling. I mean, we'll see what happens over the next few days, the reaction. But what you can get already from the coverage and actually the fact that nobody really wounded Carney. Right. So there's nothing, and he didn't also wound himself.
Well, I was going to say, Raphael, basically people are saying Carney won by not losing, and
exactly.
Which is essentially what happened, because like David says, everybody's expecting the shoe to fall, and it didn't. And he didn't embarrass himself in French. He didn't embarrass himself anywhere. He was very calm, and the other ones went with their usual platitudes and all the rest. But they couldn't shake him.
No, absolutely, and I think that's where we can say he won. He won without winning, actually.
Right.
He won because this morning, as we are waking up, we're pretty much in a status quo situation. Yeah. We're going to have to wait and see in the next polls. We have a new poll this morning showing that the lead of the Liberals might be deepening slightly, but we'll have to wait and see if there's a clear trend in that direction. But still, the Liberals have been leading the race since the beginning of this campaign, and they are still today leading that campaign following those debates because there was no catastrophe for Mark Carney. Really, Pierre Poilievre and for Quebec, Yves-François Blanchet needed to have a knockout against Mark Carney. They needed to knock him out. They needed to have a strong performance so that they could at least stand a chance at turning things around for their parties, and that did not happen clearly, both for the Conservatives and for the Bloc Québécois.
What's interesting is I think Singh did more damage to Poilievre than Carney did. I mean, keep raising his finger, 6 houses, that's all he built. No, I built 200,000 houses. And then the other business with Blanchet, which basically where he said it like he was about as useless as the monarchy. I mean, Carney didn't even have to say anything on that front. That it did more damage.
So let me ask the question from the French debate the night before, and you're right, the hockey issue was a big deal. But there wasn't much in there, French language aside, for anybody, I don't think, to pick apart and say, wow, they got him, they didn't get him.
Right.
But the English debate format was different. I'm not sure if we can say it was a better format or not, but it certainly gave the leaders a chance to pounce a little more. Did you think it made a difference either way?
I frankly didn't see it, because actually, if you look, right now, what's very fascinating about this campaign is that all the polls when you look at conservative support across the country, they're at almost all-time highs if you're looking at the last
Right.
2-3 decades.
Right.
I mean, it
Majority
goes back
range
to
in
Harper.
any other government.
If you're looking at, you're going back to Harper days when you're looking at hovering around 37-38%. That is very high for the Conservatives. And so what's fascinating about the two debates is that on the French side, Yves-François Blanchet and the Bloc, and that's what happened in 2021 with the Sachi-Curl question. The Sachi-Curl question and the impact it had on Quebec actually prevented the Liberals from achieving a majority.
Right.
And saved the Bloc because the Bloc was sputtering. And so the same thing is going on right now. So Yves-François Blanchet right now, his support in Quebec is actually inferior to Quebec's support for sovereignty. So I know this. I know this for a fact. It's not scientific, but I talk to a lot of PQ supporters, Bloc supporters who are telling me this time around this is too serious. We need an adult in the room. And just the other point in Ontario, because the whole ball game is Ontario and Quebec, right? And first and foremost, it's Ontario. What is fascinating about the scene in Ontario right now is how low the NDP has gone. Just think about this. 6 weeks ago, there was an election in Ontario, and the NDP finished with just under 20% support. And right now, they're in single digits in Ontario. That's the whole ball game, is that the NDP, and we were talking about this, Aaron, on CJD, we talked about this many times a year and a half ago, about the Liberal strategy was always saying, okay, we might need to resort to using Trump and associating Poilievre to Trump to scare the NDP into voting Liberal, and it's working. But it's also working here in Quebec, where you're scaring PQ and Bloc voters to vote Liberal, which is fascinating.
If I could just, and I get the whole thing about, you're right, 37-38% would have been
It's very high,
right?
Would have won the
But
majority.
Yes.
Why do you think everyone abandoned the NDP? Is it Jagmeet Singh? Is it him as the leader? Is it the party not really having a stance or caving, if you will, to the Liberals when they were running things and saying, okay, we'll go ahead and support you? And I hear probably have challenged them a couple of times. We can bring down this government, yet the NDP always refused. Is that what it is? Why do you think that is?
Well, I would say that the NDP, in the current circumstances, has a very hard time. Same for the Bloc, has a very hard time finding where it's standing. The DNA of the NDP has never been about the economy, and right now the priority for Canadians is the economy and who's the most fit to negotiate with Donald Trump. And that is not playing in favor of the NDP at the moment. So if you listen to Jagmeet Singh, especially during the French debate, he was always about the healthcare system. Yeah. And this is not the priority. If you look at the polls, right now the healthcare system is not the priority for Canadians because it's not
It's a provincial issue.
It's a provincial issue on top of that, but it's also not the main issue for ordinary Canadians at home. So, and even when they were talking about the French language during the French debate, Jagmeet Singh came back to the healthcare system. So he was completely out of the blue, not really aligned with the party of ordinary people right now. And I think this is in part one of the reasons why. The other reason also, I think, is because they've supported that Liberal government for so long that a lot of people are saying,
see a difference?
Is it really like a different party,
Right.
or is it just
Are they like liberal?
the left wing of the Liberal Party? I'd rather vote for the real thing than vote for the mock-up. The copycat of the Liberal Party. And I think they did not play their cards really well in trying to convince people that what they have achieved, the agenda they've pushed under Justin Trudeau, for instance, dental care, is their realization, is their successes. People at home don't feel like this is an NDP program.
Right.
And this is their big failure.
They give the Liberals credit for
They
it.
gave the Liberal credits for their own ideas.
But I think
I just want to ask one thing. If I go back to, you brought up pharmacare, dental care, which Jagmeet Singh was going to town about both French
Right.
and English debates, but then tried to make the point, and you did this repeatedly, that Pierre Poilievre, you said you're going to do away with dental care and pharmacare, and Poilievre, of course, just, no, false.
False.
Where are we on that? I mean, does that resonate?
No, it doesn't.
No.
I mean, because the thing is, you're looking at the top 5 issues. I mean, poll after poll after
Right.
poll after focus group after focus group, nobody is talking about those issues. And so what happened also, I would add to what you just said here, which I agree with, but also you have to see how masterfully Carney and the Liberals moved the party to the center in such a short time. Because the problem right now, I think, is factually right now, everything about Jagmeet Singh and the way he's conducting the campaign is not connecting with the real issues that Canadians are talking about at home. The other piece is that the left in general is floundering everywhere in Canada. I mean, look here, Quebec Solidaire is a disaster.
Everywhere.
But everywhere. The U.S., of course, the Democratic Party is in deep reimagination, disarray, call it whatever you want. But you lost the last Ontario elections. The NDP just got crushed, and so Carney, even before he became leader, the Liberals, with Mark Miller when he was still immigration minister, walking back the quotas and admitting a failure and then Carney coming up with the tax, the carbon tax. It's gone. Yesterday he used it massively. He said, "Look, it's gone. I'm not Justin Trudeau."
And Justin's gone too.
But the thing is that I think Canadians felt that the Liberals had gone too far to the left. But Carney has brought it back to a middle that most Canadians are comfortable with. And the fact is they're rejecting the left. They're rejecting the NDP, Quebec Solidaire, call it whatever you want. There's something that right now is no longer connected
But I think,
with the issues that are close to Canadians and Quebecers.
But foremost in the minds of the electorate, certainly in Quebec and Ontario, is the Trump effect. And I think that...
Oh, it's number one.
Like Monsieur Blanchet and Monsieur... I don't even think that they grasp how much this has impacted psychologically, like the mindset of voters here. I mean, there are people like bloc voters who are still like sovereignists on a certain level, and they're all scared. And because this is we travel in a north-south kind of way in Quebec, Ontario, and the rest of the country, this is really stuck out for it. This is the deciding factor. It has to be.
Mm-hmm.
I would add to what David just said about the NDP is that what's astonishing to me is that even though the Liberal Party, marketing-wise, made that major shift, I mean, it's the same party. It's the same team surrounding Carney, almost the same...
Which came up.
Yeah, you brought it up yesterday.
But it's not sticking to him.
No?
Even though the Conservatives are trying hard to show that this is still the same party, still the same team around Carney, it's not sticking to him. It doesn't seem like it's working. So in the minds of a lot of Canadians, this is a new party with a new leader. So it's no longer the Trudeau Liberals, it's the Carney Liberals. And even though they've shifted to the center, more center, even right, I would say in some instances, when you're talking about tax cuts, for instance, this is not something Justin Trudeau would have talked about in 10 years in power. So even though they did that, the left is not going back to the NDP. The left stays with the Liberals because they know that it's the best option they have to bar the Conservatives to getting to power in Ottawa. Yeah. And this is quite surprising.
I think there are two other very important points that stand out. When you look at the polling, again, this is a trend, and I doubt that the debates will affect this. This has been poll after poll after poll. When you ask Canadians who's better handling the economy, Carney and Poilievre are basically tied. But when you ask Canadians who's the best to deal with Trump, it's 25, 30 points for Carney. And the other huge thing, and you saw Poilievre try to do this, but only at the end of the debate last night. He tried also in French, but he didn't quite pull it off either, is the gender gap.
Yeah.
It is massive. Women, all ages, across the country, in Quebec and the rest of Canada, cannot stomach Pierre Poilievre. And it is massive. I mean, on all the top 5 issues, which all directly or indirectly have to do with Trump and the economy, right? You know, women go for Carney 20 to over 30 points. This is so fascinating. Even on the one issue that Poilievre wins is energy and national resources. But even on that issue, Carney beats him with women. And so, and you saw Poilievre try to maneuver this in his closing statement yesterday. You know, talk about his origins and a complete change of tone. Very, almost sounded very emotional last night. But it seemed like it was, you know, too little, too late. But that also has to be like, yes, we're talking about how the support for the Bloc and the support for the NDP has been massive and helping the Liberals, but also this gender gap is very much the reason why the Liberals are where they are right now. Which has
obviously to do with the fact that the Conservative team behind them has told them, I'm sure, start smiling, look more approachable. They realize clearly.
Talk about your humble beginnings, and you know, talk about the story of your life.
A peer prime ministerial also stopped.
But ultimately, he's not seen as prime ministerial. I mean, people look at him as. And nothing sticks. He's like Teflon. Like they try to bring up his financial background, tell us everything. You know, doesn't stick. Nothing sticks. I think what people are seeing is someone who's a serious business guy that will lead us out of the wilderness, and somebody who acts like he could be on the world stage, not somebody who's sitting there running for high school president.
He's like your dad. Right?
He's the adult in the room.
He's the adult.
He's the adult in the room, and every time, even yesterday. You know, when the way it was set up, at one point, you know, they all asked Carney the question, and they were all after him. But everything that he exuded, even sometimes, you know, he was not looking at the camera all the time. He was looking at his notes, and he was, you know, he
seemed studious.
But
very calm.
He didn't look like a politician.
Yeah.
That's what, and I think that's also what scores points for him.
Where Poilievre said to him, you know, you have the same team that Justin Trudeau had creating your notes, and I thought he had a great answer, which was, I write my own.
I write my own notes, and it looked like it.
And we saw him writing notes,
and there were weird angles, you know, where sometimes, you know, a properly trained politician would always have been looking at the camera. He wasn't, but actually it works for him because everybody says, okay, we cannot screw around. We need a smart guy at the helm to get through this. Right. And that's why even hardcore sovereignists are saying we can't mess around this time around. No, I'm just saying, but it's pretty impressive. I saw this in 2014, actually. I remember in 2014 in the provincial election when I was running with Philippe Couillard, remember, it was the context of the Charter of Values, and a lot of center Péquistes voted Liberal this time around across the province, gave the Liberals a majority because they didn't agree with it. And so you got to understand that there is a soft sovereignist vote in Quebec, and we're seeing that. You know, even the support for the PQ, there's poll after poll after poll shows that about a third of the support is Federalist.
Well, the point that you made is that sovereignty in the last Léger poll was at a higher level.
Higher than the Bloc.
Higher than the Bloc, and yet the same people are opting Liberal, which is bizarre.
Because this time around, people are saying, look, it's not a referendum on independence.
Right.
This is about our pocketbook. Yeah. And who's the best person that's going to get us through? Well, it's the smart guy who's ran two central banks.
Although they tried to call that into question last
that's
night
true.
as well, right?
What have you done? Yeah.
I mean, I didn't understand what you're trying to make stick there. I don't know how you basically go against someone who was actually the governor of the Bank of Canada and then bringing up Brexit.
Yeah, but again,
suggesting you had something to do with that,
and doing that in the English debate also, where the Bloc has no candidates. So that was a bit
maybe we should have been
weird.
impressed simply that Yves-François Blanchet started things by saying, "You're lucky to have me here. I try not to speak English in Montreal." Right off the top, and I thought, you know what? I don't think Gilles Duceppe would have said that. Had he been there, I don't think Lucien Bouchard would have said that.
No,
Yves-François Blanchet
in his
point
position.
of that was.
Yeah, well, he's trying to score. He's trying to get clips. For home, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to get clips for
Francophone media.
But Carney never got flustered. He never glared. Like, you notice how Poilievre was glaring, like...
He was steady all the time, and I think that's what's reassuring for people at home. We're looking for someone who's going to be bringing us in the right direction and keeping his head out of the water.
And not freaking out.
Even in the most, the harshest times of crisis. So this is the reassuring tone. And I think another factor that we have to take into consideration is past decisions by Poilievre. You know, when he chose 3 years ago, when he was running for a leader of the Conservative Party, he chose to side with the truckers in Ottawa, with the anti-vax people. And I think that still today,
People
in
don't
the
forget
minds of
that.
a lot of
That's a
people,
good
they
point.
still associate him to the MAGA movement, to Donald Trump, because of that specifically.
point.
Because of his tone, because of the way he was speaking, those catchphrases, you know, he was constantly using in the House of Commons for the past 3 years as leader of the official opposition. People still today, I believe, see him as a leader of the official opposition, not as a potential prime minister. And in my field of expertise, you have to embody the role you want to have, not the one you have at the moment. And this was a big mistake to me, because in the minds of people, Poilievre is not the guy we need right now.
So Poilievre
of
brings
that.
up tough on crime, right? That continues to be something for him.
Right.
And he also, and I wonder, I thought reaction was interesting, this idea of using the notwithstanding clause to deal with mass murders. It started off with the opposition calling it a slippery slope. I think they've gotten a little more severe in their criticism of it. Does that something you think resonates with, or do you think Canadians really care? And I bring this up because I asked this on my show the other day. How many people are actually in that position, that we're dealing with people who are going to get out? He mentioned Alexandre Bissonnette, the Quebec City mosque shooting. I think most people agree he's not getting out after 25 years anyway. Does this make sense as a campaign issue?
It does in conservative Poilievre land, because here's the situation. Even last Sunday on Tout le monde en parle, the big question to Poilievre was, are you a mini Trump? You know, to get back, because and even in the Journal de Montréal, you have columnists still referring to Poilievre as a mini Trump, and so that has stuck. And so I'm going back to the gender gap issue. The reason why Poilievre has been trying to push law and order over the last couple of weeks, and pushing it again yesterday, is because the conservative, you know, upper echelons, the people that are running the campaign, Jenny Byrne, et cetera, they feel that's the way into women. They feel that if they can push that agenda, they remain true to their convictions and what they feel is important as in terms of their brand of conservative politics is. And I think what they're trying to do with this is trying to get into women, and it's not working, because people right now, and you're seeing it again, crime is not a top 5 issue. It's just not.
I think there's also a factor where they're trying to limit the damage as much as possible. And the issue they're going to have in 2 weeks is to get out the vote, their vote. So they need to maintain their base as much mobilized as they can, even though they're not leading in the polls. They have to get out the Conservative vote so that they don't lose too many seats and they don't offer on a silver plate a majority to Mark Carney and the Liberals. So they have to make sure that they're talking to that base constantly, even though they're trying to appeal to a broader audience. They also have to maintain their bases mobilized as much as possible so they get out and vote. Voting starts today. Today for the long weekend. And then you have the vote on Election Day on April 28th. So it was a crucial moment for Pierre Poilievre also to speak to his base. I would also add to what David said, it's very interesting to see the gender gap, yes, but there's also a generational divide. And that's very interesting, because for the first time in a very long time, a majority of younger Canadians are planning on voting for the Conservatives. And why is that? It's because they are disillusioned by the dream they were sold, and now they can't even afford a house, or they can't afford groceries and pay the rent at the same time.
Which is something Poilievre goes on about on a regular
Absolutely,
basis.
and he's appealing to these people. But his main problem is that these people, sadly, still today, don't go out and vote as much as older boomers and X Generation X.
Which brings up the question of efficiency of the vote, which is talked about an awful lot, right? And that's a positive for the Liberals.
Totally. No, but again, it is. But in this instance, again, there's still 10 days to go. But the voting starts, as we said today, and throughout the weekend. The efficiency of the vote is one thing, but what you're seeing is all these battlegrounds that the Conservatives were banking on to win because of three-way races have disappeared.
Right.
And so again, the way the Conservatives can win in the GTA, can win 20 to 30 seats in Quebec, which was in December feasible, was about making sure there were healthy three-way races in these ridings. In Ontario, obviously, it's the NDP that's the third party, and in Quebec, it's the Bloc. And so right now you're not seeing that. So it's going to be, yes, of course, about organization, but the Liberals do have a good organization.
You know, but one thing it hasn't helped. The knives are already out for Poilievre in Ontario.
They've been
like
out
Ford's
for weeks.
guy, like yes, but like
Corey
right,
tonight,
like has decided that like they've
Well,
mishandled
Ford isn't
it.
even meeting with them. He
Exactly.
won't even meet with them.
And that does not help.
Yeah. I agree with what David said about the three-way race advantaging the Conservatives. You know, it's a situation that I have experienced myself.
You mean
back in-
advantaging the Liberals?
Well,
No, the absence
the
of
absence-
three-way.
Right.
The absence
if
of
there
three-way
were-
race.
If there were a
right.
three-way race with the NDP and the Liberals
That would-
dividing the left
right.
vote, that would be to the advantage
Yeah.
of the Conservatives, which it is not. It's not the situation right now. It's a situation we have seen. I remember I was on the campaign with the Conservatives in 2015, and for almost all of the campaign, the vote was divided between the NDP, which was led by Tom Mulcair at the time, and the Liberals were third. And there was a shifting point, especially during the debates in 2015. And after that, the Liberals started to pick up in the polls and drastically steal votes to the NDP and eventually won the election. So this is a situation, back in 2015, we saw that there was a way to for the Conservatives to win maybe a minority, maybe a majority, as long as the vote was divided. And then all of a sudden it changed when the left vote went to the Liberals.
Right.
This time it's pretty much a similar scenario where all the votes from the NDP on the left side are going to the Liberals, and same thing in Quebec. A lot of votes for the Bloc Québécois. If you look at it closely, the Quebec is essential to the Liberals having a majority on April the 28th. And right now, they're taking roughly 15 seats to the Bloc Québécois. This is what could make a difference between a
Absolutely.
majority and a minority for Mark Carney. Because if you look at the projections, the latest projections right now, the Liberals have roughly a 20-seat majority, could have a 20-seat majority in the House of Commons with the current polls. So 15 seats from Quebec is essential in their strategy. Right?
Yeah.
Can I ask, if we just go back generally, because we're going to run out of time, what do you think stuck last night, if anything? Anybody's attack on anybody else? Did anything really stick, hit home, that will hurt?
I don't think so. I thought that, Carney's response to Poilievre, I'm not Justin Trudeau, and those aren't my policies.
Yeah.
It stuck, and it stuck the day before in French, and it stuck at Tout le monde en parle. And the thing is that they keep running these ads, of Carney being Trudeau since the beginning of the campaign, and we're seeing the results. It's not sticking. So, what I will say is, you made a very good point about keeping the base mobilized. I think what you saw Poilievre do, and he's a very good speaker. You have a bunch of clips that are going to be running on social media throughout the weekend and for the rest of the campaign, and it's going to be about trying to get that vote out. But I don't think Carney was wounded at all yesterday, and that was the goal. I mean, you didn't have that moment, right, where you're saying, which we've seen in certain debates throughout the years, and that have been defining moments, and so you did not have that. So unless there is some sort of seismic shift in terms of the issues, again, the top 5 issues have remained the same throughout the campaign. And so unless that shifts, and Poilievre
not
has
much time left.
no, there isn't, and it's basically now it's the ground game. It's there are phases to these things, right? It's always basically the same phase. After the debates, it's getting out the vote. That's it. I mean, yes, they're going to do activities, but no major policy announcements. There isn't going to be. So, is there going to be an October surprise? I doubt it. And so, is there going to be something, somebody that's going to drop so drastically the ball, such a huge scandal that it won't happen? But then what happens is that Now the problem for the Liberals is that if it appears to be so much in the bag, will people stay home? And so that's going to be the key.
You said that we're not going to get a major policy position, not likely. But what happens, because we know we are getting the financial plan?
Yeah.
How much is all this stuff going to cost, whether it's conservative,
Yeah.
liberal? Do people not pay attention to that? And I bring that up only because a month or 2 months ago,
Yeah.
oh my God, we're running a $60 billion deficit and everyone cared.
Yeah.
Now there's money being rolled out for everything. We don't even talk about the
Yeah.
deficit anymore. Does that matter?
I don't think so. I think ordinary people at home are currently very focused on their own budget, making ends meet at home, and they don't really care about
They're
that.
anxious.
Yeah.
Plus, on top of that, we've been running deficits after deficits for the past
Yeah,
10
forever,
years,
yeah.
and it didn't bar people from still voting for the Trudeau
Yeah,
Liberals. So
yeah.
I don't think it's a main issue for a lot of people. You know, it's you're spending other people's money.
You know, one
They feel Carney is responsible on that. It goes to his strength.
More.
I mean,
More.
It goes to his strength. He said he's basically saying, look, we'll take care of everything.
And still, Canadians.
what I'm doing.
Let's not forget that Canadians have voted 3 times in a row for a prime minister, a leader who said the budget will balance itself.
And I think one thing is certain too, in the minds of the electorate, certainly in Quebec and Ontario, that this, if Poilievre loses, he's gone, and Singh is probably gone. Blanchette, I don't, maybe.
I mean, if he's
but you get
losing
the
half of his seats,
yeah,
of course he
absolutely,
can't stay.
and you get the sense Carney, win or lose, will still be around, and that's a big difference because you know that.
I don't know.
I mean, if
Is
let's say,
Carney,
I don't know
if,
about
Carney,
that.
if Carney loses, is he still going to be around? Is he going to sit in opposition for 4 years?
no,
Carney?
of course not.
I don't. Why not?
Why not?
No,
Yeah?
of course not.
Why not?
No, he has no.
I think
interest
he
in
would.
doing that.
I don't know. I'm
He
hearing
has
people
no
question
interest
that
in doing
idea.
that.
Well, you don't think he will?
I don't think he will because he's not there for that.
Yeah.
He didn't enter politics. He entered politics. What he's going to tell you is, I entered politics to lead this country in a major crisis, in a historic crisis, to help my country facing Donald Trump's threat. If I can't do that, I'm not relevant anymore. I'm going to go back to what I used
Looks
to do in
good
the
on a
private
CV.
sector. But what's interesting is what's Poilievre going to do? And I think there's 2 scenarios here. First one is the Liberal minority. So Poilievre could maybe remain as leader, justifying saying, well, we didn't win, but at least we might stand a chance in a year and a half to, like, eventually in another election.
But does he
It's gonna
have
be-
that choice?
It's going to be tricky for
Does
that.
the party make a decision and say, you know what, no,
Very
you've
good
had
question.
your shot?
But there's going to have to be questions asked internally for this party because they've been leading in the polls for the past 2 years and a half. And basically what we understand today is that the reason why Poilievre was leading so much is not because people wanted to vote for him or because people were agreeing with their policies. It's mainly because people wanted to get rid of Justin Trudeau. And now that Justin Trudeau is no longer part of the equation, now that the ballot question is no longer a referendum on the future of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister or not, then it all falls apart for the Conservatives. So there has to be a major introspection for the Conservatives because David mentioned it. They're already at a ceiling right now. They've reached that ceiling of support they can get in Canada, and still they can't even stand a chance at getting a majority. So what do we do next? Is the solution going even more to the right, as they tried to do with Pierre Poilievre and trying to seduce the anti-vax and the truckers in Ottawa and stuff like that, and people who watch True North and Rebel News? Or would the solution be to try and go more towards the center-right and try to take some of those ideas?
Bring forwarded.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go back to the success of the Mulroney era, for instance.
Yeah.
Because it's going nowhere right
Yeah.
now.
You know, it's funny, when I asked David about who do you think or what would stick last night, we all assumed I was talking about Mark Carney, like, you know, what stuck to him. But there are 3 other people in that room. Do you think any of them were hurt by some of the allegations, some of the facts that came out last night? Was Pierre Poilievre hurt in any way? I'll bring up the Century Initiative, which he made seem like fact about Canada's population, right? Going to 100 million. That's not part of the Liberal campaign. Does that hurt? I mean, we didn't get any fact checking because the scrum was canceled.
Right.
Right.
So we're not going to ever find out what that happened. But was there something there that sticks to Poilievre?
I really don't.
6
think so.
seats, 6 houses, all in my mind. I had this visual of Singh with the 6 houses. You know, like one saying 200,000. I mean, it's just.
Well, he's supposed to be answering questions today, so we'll see what he says about it. So there's going to be fact checking, even though there was no scrum last night. And it's a shame, by the way, parentheses here, but it's a shame that we had the debates commission had to cancel last minute the scrum because it's an important moment in our democracy. A lot of people are watching at home and they need to have answers and they need to have transparency from the leaders. And sometimes during the debate itself, you only get the lines that were prepared for the leaders, and the real stuff comes out during those scrums. And sadly, it was a missed opportunity both yesterday and the night before, because the Debates Commission made a major mistake to invite those so-called alternative media, which are no media at all. Let's be honest. They're activist organizations. They're pushing an agenda, and these people were invited. And yet again, yesterday we had issues in the newsroom, and they had to cancel at the last minute. And sadly, it's bad for democracy, and it's bad for people at home who didn't get the answers they deserve.
I would ask if I can put on your crystal or look into your crystal ball going forward, and you mentioned not a lot likely to change between now and Election Day. What do you see happening? What's the strategy if you're a party now?
Well, one of the toughest things in sport is going to halftime at the Super Bowl when you're trailing by 20 and change the strategy that got you there the entire season. And so that's been the biggest problem for the Conservatives, and here in Quebec for the Bloc. The Bloc has tried, and François Blanchet has tried, playing identity politics, trying to bring out, the ghosts of notwithstanding clauses, judges, jurisdictions.
Tried to buy Canada Act.
And so the idea here is that what I was trying to say also about Yves-François Blanchet was, so there was jurisdiction, there was language, 96, the notwithstanding clause, and a few other things. But anyways, I lost my train of thought. But
But
I
it's
like
the
the
same
sport.
thing.
I like the sports analogy. Like
Yeah.
maybe they should employ what Philadelphia Eagles is tush push. Maybe
well,
to
no,
pull
but
them over the line.
at the end of the day, there has nothing that was indicated by Wednesday's debate or yesterday's debate that you could put your hat on saying that's changed substantially, that moved segments, because this is all about micro segmentation, micro targeting groups. This is all very, very intricate. Technology is involved, and AI is involved through social media, targeting depending with your social economic background, and you're targeted. And so right now there is nothing in the messages that Poilievre's put forward that has been shown to move these segments to him. And that's why Corey Tanaik, who is considered right now one of the top conservative strategists in the country, who came out 2 weeks ago now saying, you got to change strategies. You have to change your game plan because you're not tracking. Even last night, he was on with Vassy Kapelos after the debate saying, look, Poilievre is simply not connecting on the key issues. And he himself also, he mentioned the gender gap also yesterday. All of us, when you look at the Nanos polling, the Palace data, the Leger, it is stunning how women are not connecting with Poilievre. Yeah. And so there is nothing right now that, unless again, and that's why we do have elections. The thing is, it's going to be now about turnout, about organization, and it's going to be about the GTA and these seats outside Montreal that are in play, and now the Liberals are leading that 3 months ago they had no shot at winning. My goodness, right now you have these polls, like in deep rural Quebec, that is tracking Liberal by 10, 15 points. So it's like, will that vote actually come out and do it? That's going to be the question.
And that could turn on a dime when Trump's gone.
Well, it turned on a dime last time around. In 2021, it turned on a dime on Sachi Kurl's question.
Right.
There was a 10-point shift and a 10, 15 seat shift in
Debates
Quebec.
are over. That's not going to happen.
No, but I mean,
So
I'm
what
talking
is
about,
it?
if I knew, did you know that Biden was going to have a senior moment during the June debate? No, we didn't know.
Yeah.
It's the ephemeral. That's the only thing right now that could happen, and that's what to change things around.
I think all they can do right now, it's we're 10 days away from the voting, from election day. The only thing that the Conservatives can do right now is to pray for a miracle, basically, and hope that Carney will make a major mistake while asking questions with the media, for instance, that could maybe trigger a major crisis for the Liberals at the very end of the campaign, so that the momentum shifts in their favor. I don't think we're in a situation where the Conservatives can in any way possible hope for a minority government, for instance. It's clear that it's clear to me that we're going to have a Liberal government. Now, the difference could be between a majority or a minority government led by Mark Carney. So if there's a major mistake done by Mark Carney, that could eventually cost him a few seats and eventually
But not the
majority,
election.
not the election in the end. So I think right now
I wouldn't bet on that. I'm very, very calculating, very cautious kind of guy. If he hasn't, he fell into traps at the beginning. He's been remarkably good at staying
Well,
away
to
from
Bill's
It's
point, though,
gonna be
could the
very
one thing be Brookfield? Details getting out about what he didn't reveal, what his financial.
Hasn't stuck.
Does that
Well,
matter?
unless there's something about any whiff of real evidence on something corrupt, But again, what came out is that a lot of Conservatives are invested in Brookfield.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with. Remember a few weeks ago we had spoken about that on the radio. We had. That candidate in Ontario of that Carney had to let go, who ultimately withdrew because of comments he made. We should put a price on the head of the other candidate, and less than not even 12 hours later, the onslaught, and ultimately 4 or 5 Conservative candidates had to withdraw so far, including some in Quebec. So. The idea is that for voters, this is not, that has not tracked. So you keep beating that dead horse.
Right.
So yes, okay, he had a big job with a big company that actually a lot of Canadians are invested in.
Oh, right.
he's been constantly questioned since the beginning of the campaign
And they're
on
impressed by
revealing
that.
his assets, on his refusal to reveal his assets. It doesn't seem like it's really a major issue to people at home. Most Canadians don't seem
Well,
to
they
really
see him
care
as
about
a
that.
successful businessman.
Exactly, but I would say also he's the fresh face right now. He's the new flavor of the month. So I think people are really indulgent right now. They're forgiving a lot to him because he's new and he seems like the right guy. I think it's mainly a perception issue for Pierre Poilievre. He's seen as not being the right guy for the right situation right now, and we need someone like Mark Carney who's calm and reassuring and who seems like he's the one who's the most fit to bring us in a better situation facing Donald Trump.
All right, we have to wrap up. I will point out one thing, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me Pierre Poilievre has given up on the Canada is broken slogan, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're not hearing that anymore.
Now it's Canada strong.
He learned from that lesson that that's not going to resonate at all.
But too little, too late.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't pivot, and they're still not really pivoting. When you look at the end of the day, the messages that he's putting out, he hasn't really adapted. And another thing that is cruelly missing from the Conservative campaign is the lack of competent surrogates. You're not seeing a team. You're not seeing what you haven't seen so far is, and again, I'm going back to my own experience, but it wasn't the only time it was done. But when we were running back in 2014, one of the turning points in the campaign is when Philippe Couillard came out with Carlos Leitao, Martin Coiteux, and Jacques Daoust, and it was the economic dream team. And a lot of people said, oh boy, okay, we are in, because at the time, not like today at all, but at the time, the economy and Quebec's finances were shambles, and it was a major issue. In Quebec and in the rest of Canada, you cannot point to, and just like you could back in the Harper days or the Mulroney days, where Mulroney could point to Michael Wilson, I've got my Bay Street guy that's going to take that is serious. Of course, Stephen Harper had the late Jim Flaherty, who again a Bay Street guy.
Sure.
He's going to so the failure of the Conservatives to understand that the issue is who can best weather this unprecedented economic crisis with actual people that know how to do
Where are
this.
my guys?
Where are his guys? Like in Quebec,
Good point.
you can't point to star candidates for the Conservatives or the Bloc for that matter, but you can't point to anybody there. And the same thing in Ontario. You can't point to like seasoned Bay Street guys. Even Trump actually has, Wall Street guys. You could totally disagree, but his people are actual Wall Street guys. And so you're like, well, where's your team and where's your response?
Really
and he
point.
could have recruited star candidates back when he was leading the polls in the past 2 years. He
Missed that
had time to
opportunity,
do
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He didn't do that, and it seems it gives the impression that it's a one-man show right now for the Conservatives.
All you ever see him is with his wife and kid. You don't see him with other politicians. You never see
And
Carney with
where's
his wife
Doug
and
Ford?
children.
Where's Doug Ford,
Yeah, exactly.
who just
Yeah.
won
No,
a
it's-
massive Conservative majority?
And he doesn't let media close to him.
He
very-
said, I don't need you. I have my way, and I'm
Yeah.
going to win no matter what. And the fact is that this piece, I kept wondering, well, he's going to roll out an economic team. He's going to roll out some, or not necessarily candidates, but like advisors that are going to.
Is it too late for that?
Well, he may, again, this is the time now where you got to throw everything at the wall hoping it sticks. So you're going to see Blanchette and Poilievre and saying, throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at the wall, hoping something breaks through. And so you're going to hear things about, you heard
It's gonna
Blanchette
be
last
dirty.
week saying
It's gonna be dirty.
Carney doesn't like Quebecers and doesn't know
Doesn't
Quebecers.
give a damn.
Doesn't give a damn about Quebecers. So you're going to hear Poilievre trying, but I think, one thing, if again, and there's nothing to suggest otherwise, if issue number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are linked directly or indirectly to Trump and the pocketbook, Poilievre has to start talking about that, which he hasn't done.
One thing, he's got guts, so I tell you, he goes to Maison Radio-Canada, where he's talking about defunding the CBC, and
Sure.
don't underestimate what that means
But
to
Raphael
Quebecers.
said it. It scores points with his base. That's
Exactly.
for his
Yeah.
base.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like it's almost like the Conservatives were caught by surprise at the sudden change of what the priorities were for Canadians. So they had these slogans, these catchy phrases, common sense conservative and stuff like that. You don't hear that anymore because they eventually saw that they needed to adjust their strategy. But it seems like they've never found the right messaging to fit and to connect with Canadians.
Yeah.
And on that, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank you both, David
Thanks,
Heurtel,
guys.
Raphaël Melançon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank the Ritz for taking care of us today as well. We'll see you again soon on another episode of the Corner Booth Podcast.